Welcome to the video and the channel. A few years ago I scooped up and painted myself a Kroot kill team, and you can see half of that team on the screen here. At the time I didn't build a Stalker option for the team, so this video is all about me painting up and adding a Stalker. As it's been a few years, I'm hoping to paint something that's a bit better but still very much in keeping with the way I painted the kill team before. The first thing I did was lay down some simple base coats over the model, and all the Kroot in my kill team have a green skin tone with some amount of Nurgling green in them. I use that colour in every skin tone, and I mix it with various other greens, browns and blues in order to get a different set of skin tones that all have a similar feel. As I lay down some base coats, I wanted to talk a little bit about the channel and what I plan to do. The mission for the channel is for me to share my work as I strive to become a better painter, meaning I'll paint all different kinds of miniatures to try and improve while having fun along the way. At the moment these videos are not meant to be a direct tutorial. My main aim is to inspire and entertain, but I will be explaining what I'm doing as I go along, so you may pick up some tips and tricks. I do also want to push myself, so I'm going to do some challenges and make some bigger dioramas and things later down the line as well. You can see me adding Rhinox hide to the cloak here, and Rhinox hide is one of 3 colours I was using for the material and leathers on this character, and those other 2 are Steel Legion Drab and Gal Vorback Red. This video was a bit of a test, and I was experimenting with my video editing and my filming, so it might be a bit rough around the edges. I'm hoping to settle on something a little bit more consistent over the next few videos as I discover what works for me. So with the base coats down on the model, this is what it looks like, and our next step is to go on to shadows. I'm going to apply those manually and not with a wash, but you could definitely do this with a wash and it would probably save you a bit of time. I'm going to save any metallic parts of the miniature till later. So for the shadow colour of my skin tone, I'm going to go for Caliban Green, and I'm just going to apply that into the recesses. I'm going to look for the deepest points, the lines between the muscles and the various elements that are touching the skin, and I'm just going to put a line of that colour in there. I'm not worrying about being too neat here. This is going to look a bit messy to begin with, but I am going to come in with the base tone again and clean it up later. If I was unsure of where I should be putting a shadow, then I would just kind of add the line in there, make sure that it's some of that darker colour there, just to create a contrast. We can cover it later. One thing that you'll also see me do here is I'm taking all the downward facing surfaces and I'm painting them with the shadow colour. So this part of the leg that you can see, I'm about to make that all Caliban green. I know that's not really the box art style to just do small shadow colours, but for me, I just really like to do a little bit more contrast, so I'm going to add more shadow to those downward facing areas. Once I put a bit of the shadow in all of the recesses, I then had something that looked a bit like this. So from here, I'm going to keep adding shadows to different parts of the miniature in the same way. And I'm just picking any colour here that's darker than the base tone I used. Specifically, the next part is his belly, which I base coated Ushabti bone before. Now I'm going to use a mix of Ushabti bone with Thondia brown in it in order to darken that tone and add a bit of shadow. I think I then used Rhinox hide to do a bit of shading on the Steel Legion Drab, which I've used over the chest and the big old gun holder. Again, I'm just manually adding that in with a brush. It's quite thick at the moment, so it's quite messy, but that's fine because I'm going to come in with the base coats. I'm going to neat everything up. Hopefully you can see though that there's a bit of definition starting to appear if I actually hold the model in front of the camera. I've chosen a really high contrast for this, so my shade color is quite a lot darker than my base tone. And that's okay. I really want this miniature to pop. I want the details to be really well defined, so I've gone for that extra contrast just to try and really get that big pop. I think that was missing from the Kroot that I painted before. They had just a little bit less contrast on them. Along similar lines, I'm going to use a black now. I'm not going to use it directly. I'm going to add it to the Rhinox hide base coat, and then I'm going to add in that shadow here on the cloak in the deepest recess areas and the areas that I think would be in shadow, painting that on manually so I've got control. Once again, you could do that with a wash if you wanted to. So after adding all the shadows to my main elements, this is what I've got. Looking a bit rough, but you can see there's a bit of definition forming from those shadows that we've just added. So next we're going to do that neatening up stage that I mentioned, where we're going to take the base coats and we're going to make sure that everything looks a little bit neater. What I'm really going to do there is try and thin all those lines I've just created and make their edges a bit softer and smoother by adding back base coats. So you can see me doing that on the leg here, and you can hopefully immediately see that this is going to improve things. We've still got that shadow color in the recesses, but now we've got the base tone back over the top, making it much neater, making those lines far thinner, which is really crucial to this. We only really need a tiny bit of the shadow color on show just for a bit of contrast. This is me doing the arm. You can see I built this miniature in sub-assemblies, so I am jumping back to some of those other parts to paint those as well as I use these colors. After that, I jumped almost immediately into highlights, and I started highlighting the Gal Warbite red. I used a bit of the Ushabti bone added into that to lighten that up, and once that was significantly lighter, I was happy to put that down. The key thing here is to just create contrast so that I can outline these parts and make them clear and defined. I'm just trying to be really, really neat with the brush and really only touch the very edge to keep a very thin line. Otherwise I'll have to do a load of work coming in to clean that up later, which is always a bit inevitable with this kind of model. You're always going to have to do a little bit of cleanup. Well, unless you have the steadiest hands ever, but I don't. Then I'm moving on to the Steel Legion drab, and again I think I'm using that Ushabti bone here. I'm being economical with my wet palette and using the same colours as much as possible. I'm trying not to worry too much about specific recipes and colours that specifically highlight other colours. I'm just kind of trying to see if I can mix colours that I've got with other brighter colours and create highlights and shadows that work for me. After this, I then used leather brown to highlight the cloak, though I didn't think that was much of a contrast in the long run, so I think I did do an even brighter highlight later on. Still good to get some form of highlight down on here though, just to create a bit of definition, like with the rest. And highlighting the cloak is lovely because it's got all these big raised areas. I can just run the brush along them with the side of the brush, and it just, yeah, it's really nice and easy. You can see me doing it here quite quickly, so it makes the brush look quite frantic as I'm going back and forward. This footage was sped up though, so it was a bit slower in the real thing. I'm going to move the camera slightly in my future videos just so I don't keep catching my hair and losing focus on the model. Hopefully you'll agree that the cloak is starting to come to life with this brighter highlight, and I think I just went a bit brighter than the leather brown with a little bit more of that ushabti bone mixed in to really brighten things up. After that, I'm using Ferocious Green from the Army Painter Fanatic range, and I'm going to use that to highlight the skin. This didn't end up being as much of a contrast as I wanted it to be, but I added it to all the sort of raised areas anyway. I will come in with another colour in a minute and start highlighting that further. But this is what that looks like now that we've got to that stage. It's not a whole lot different. Next up is Iron Rack Skin. This is the colour I chose to use to then make an even higher highlight. I really thought that this colour added a lot of pop to the skin. So as you see me adding it here, you'll see that the skin really starts to come to life, and I really like the definition that it creates in the contrast to some of that really dark Caliban green. And with this colour, I'm just trying to be really neat. I'm trying to make really thin lines of the highlight. I don't want anything to be too big, so I'm being careful running my brush over. And if I do make anything too big or thick, I will have to come back with the base coat and fix that up. So I probably did do that a few times off camera. As you can see there, the leg is really starting to feel defined. But next up, we're going to be doing the highlight of the belly. So that ushabti bone that we added to it before, we're now just going to add some Screaming Skull to the top of that to highlight that. Screaming Skull is a pretty standard colour to highlight something like ushabti bone. It's just a much brighter, creamy sort of beige. Then you'll see me highlighting the head. As I mentioned, I built this miniature in sub-assemblies. I'd never done that before. This first batch of videos where I've prepared some miniatures, I've done it in sub-assemblies for the first time, and it created its own challenges, but it's also quite rewarding in the way that you can paint each piece separately. And for this, the head was really useful to paint separately because I really wanted it to look good. So I really wanted to create good contrast. So I've added lots of shadow, lots of highlight in order to create lots of contrast between those areas. And hopefully you can see there that there's lots of definition in the side of the head with all the different parts that all the quills from the back of the head come out of. I made sure to go around and just touch up anywhere that looked like it needed a small bit of the extra colour to be brighter, so all of that muscle definition really stands out. That included the fingers. Now off camera here, I did actually end up doing another layer of highlight, so I went even a little bit brighter. I added in another brighter colour, something like a Screaming Skull, that I'd have added into that Iron Rack Skin just to really help contrast and pop. And then I just did that again. I just went over all the tops and little bits and just highlighted with a slightly brighter green colour. You'll also notice that I base coated a load of things black for all the metals. I wanted to make sure that there was a good strong undercoat for those metals to go on top of. I'm just adding a dark silver from Pro Acryl all over this as a base coat. Then I'm going to use Mecha Color Dark Steel, and I'm going to add that over the top as my first highlight. I'm also then going to use Model Air Vallejo Silver, because it's absolutely wonderful in terms of its coverage and the way it paints, to create the very brightest highlight that will give it a really nice shine. And when I'd done that, I ended up with a miniature that looked a bit like this. And you can see there's a good bit of shine on those metals now. So now you'll notice that I've glued the head on the miniature and the arms, because I did all the same stages on those parts as well. And one of the key things we're going to do here is we're going to highlight the quills that come out of the back of his head, and we're going to do that first with Mournfang, and then we're going to add Scrag Brown as an even brighter one over the top. Here I'm dotting the eyes. I'm using a pure white to do that because I want the eyes to really stick out over the highlights that I've done around the rest of the face. Thankfully, I managed to get the eyes okay, but I did have to do a tiny bit of neatening up just to make sure that there's a good bit of dark shadow around each of the eyes to really help them stand out. Next up, I did have to look at the box art a little bit just to see what the colours on the black parts of this model were, and so I used a bit of Dark Reaper, and then I think I used Thunderhawk Blue to highlight the face mask and the knee pads. I just tried to keep the lines really thin. I tried to make sure that there was still plenty of the black colour showing through, because that will make sure that the knee pads and the face mask still look black in the long run. Once I've done that, I've got something that looks like this, and we're going to call that finished for the miniature today. I know I didn't film just about everything that I painted on this guy. It would have taken many more hours to have shown all of that in the footage, but I have got a really nice result, and hopefully you've got a bit of an idea of how I did it. For the base here, I have actually made a separate short on my channel, so if you want to find out how I painted that base, please check that out. I'm also just holding up an old Kroot from my old kill team just to see how they compare, and I think it looks really good together. Thank you for watching. In the next video, I'm going to paint a miniature that's really cool, and I've already painted it, so I know that it turns out really fantastic, so I hope you'll join me and watch that one as well.